Hi guys, I'm Aurora. And there was a time when I was a happy girl with wonderful parents and a great hobby. My father was a riding instructor at Hopkins Racing stable, and he was busy preparing a horse named Prince for a championship. I loved horses, so I spent all my free time at the stable. My father and Mr. Hopkins bought Prince a couple of years ago when he was just a little cute colt. I literally saw Prince growing up and I was quite fond of him. My father broke Prince in and wanted him to be a champion. Prince was amazing and showed really fantastic results, leaving behind even the fastest Hopkins horses. And there were around 40 horses in Hopkins' stable. Prince was 3 years old when he started to win his first races. Once during a training, we noticed that he was nervous and pushed the rider off twice. My father was surprised and angry with Prince because it was him who trained Prince, and he was sure that the horse was quite obedient. Besides, there were men who started making jokes about Prince and my father, so my father decided to ride Prince and prove everyone that Prince obeyed him. He put a saddle on the horse and mounted it. The horsekeeper named Bill tried to stop my father, but he was persistent and didn't want to listen to anybody. He made a few laps and then wanted Prince to go faster. The horse accelerated, but then suddenly stopped, and my father fell down on a concrete curb. He didn't have a chance. Someone called an ambulance. I remember my mother's face, people wearing black, flowers, and Mr. Hopkins' speech. My mother was barely alive. She didn't speak to anyone for days. When she was able to pull herself together, she said that she didn't want me to ever go to the stable again. Prince was punished. He was put into a solitary place, and vets and horsekeepers tried to reveal what had happened to him. However, no one could understand what had made him so nervous that day. I violated my mother's order and regularly visited the stable. I talked a lot with Bill. He told me that Steve was Prince's new instructor. There were a few races and Prince never won. Then Steve suggested to get rid of the horse. I took care of Prince and tried to understand what was wrong, if he was sick or something. Bill told me that I had to learn to talk to him so that he could trust me. I spent a lot of time with Prince, and soon I started to notice that we could understand each other. He ate only the food that I brought to him and refused to consume the food Steve considered to be right for him. Finally, I got up enough courage to talk to Mr. Hopkins and Steve. I told them that Prince needed a special diet and care, and that he still could be a champion. Hopkins was surprised and asked Steve why he had told him that Prince was just a waste of resources. Steve insisted that he was right. However, Mr. Hopkins gave me 10 days to convince him that Prince was worth the effort. I had to prepare him for the race and ride him if I wanted. I was highly motivated, and Prince, with me as a rider, won the first test race among the other horses of the stable, leaving those behind by 10 full seconds. For some reason, Steve was really mad. Well, I understand it actually. It was me, a young girl, not him who completed the task. Hopkins was very glad about Prince and allowed me to compete at the city race. I received an outfit and started getting ready for the race. On the day of the race, all of a sudden, my mother locked me in my room. I didn't expect it, so I couldn't warn Hopkins about it. My mother made a scene and scolded me for breaking her order. As I later found out, it was Steve who told her. He also said that I spent all days at the stable with Prince and that I had fallen down from him a few times. Being locked down in the room without a phone, I couldn't prove that he was wrong. On the next day, I was allowed to go to school, but I decided to skip it and went to the stable. Bill told me that Prince's rider was one of Steve's men and that Prince acted weird and pushed the rider off soon after the start of the race. He also mentioned that Prince ran away and a few men went out to catch him, for which he was flogged and poured with cold water. As soon as someone noticed me at the stable, I was forced to leave. Then I called Bill, who told me that Mr. Hopkins ordered to send Prince to the slaughterhouse, the horse that cost a fortune, when he was little. Bill also said that when my father and Mr. Hopkins went to England to buy Prince, they agreed that Prince would be the property of both of them, 50-50. I asked my mother for money to buy Prince, but the idea made her crazy. I burst into tears, trying to explain to her that I had to save Prince, or he would be slaughtered, that Prince was a good horse, a special one, who needed to be talked to and taken good care of. My mother locked me down again. She talked to me through the door and explained that she was doing that to protect me from the wild animal that had killed my father. Then she added that animals were meant to serve people, so that we could ride them or eat them. I kept trying to convince her that Prince was worth saving, but she didn't listen. I realized that I had lost my last chance to save the horse. I was very tired and upset, so I fell asleep. In my dream, I saw Prince, who could speak to me. He said that he was in pain, but alive. I woke up in the morning. I remembered the dream, and I didn't know how true it was. I decided to talk to my mother. I told her that Prince must have already been slaughtered, and I accepted that fact, but I wanted to have something from him. I asked her if I could go to the stable and take his halter to keep it as a memory. She was touched and allowed me to go. I rushed to Bill. Bill was relaxed, and that seemed strange to me. I asked him if Prince was alive. He smiled at me and said that Prince wasn't the horse to die so easily, that we would hear about him again. I thought that Bill was trying to calm me down to avoid my suffering. I took Prince's halter and a braid from his tail. Stable security guys told me that Steve had taken Prince to the slaughterhouse. I felt devastated, but at this stage, I could do nothing for Prince already. 6 months later, I heard that Hopkins stable had a new horse that promised to be a champion. Its name was Lecter. Hopkins was very proud of it, so I decided to look at Lecter. It was a 3-year-old red stallion, light-hearted but arrogant. I even talked to it once. I asked about Steve and learned that he had quit long ago. Hopkins greeted me and asked what I thought about his new star. I told him the truth, that Lecter was a poor copy of Prince. He was a bit hurt, but didn't say anything. I also asked him about the gentleman's agreement about Prince that he had with my father back in England. He confirmed that they had agreed, but as neither my father nor Prince were alive, the agreement was void, and that he was sorry about that. A few more months later, I was watching a TV program about horse racing in England when I saw a horse named Nasik, who I could swear was my Prince. Nasik was a different color, but the character and behavior was Prince's. I Googled him, watched all videos with him, and finally realized that I wasn't mistaken. I downloaded all the materials and went to Bill. Then he went to Hopkins and looked through all the information I had found. We all were confident about the fact that Nasik was our horse. Hopkins called his friend from the Equestrian Federation of England and asked about Nasik. Imagine our surprise when we learned that Nasik's owner was Steve Douglas, the same Steve who had worked for Hopkins Racing, and that Nasik cost €500,000 and the price would continue rising. We discussed the situation. Hopkins assumed that Steve had intentionally tortured Prince to lower his results and make Hopkins refuse from him. Then he said that he would take him to the slaughterhouse, but instead sent him to England. After that, he quit his job, saying that he was in poor health, and went to England himself. Hopkins was furious about Steve's scam. He thanked me and promised that he would return Prince to us, and that I would be his rider, and Bill, his instructor. I reminded him about the gentleman's agreement, according to which Prince belonged to both Hopkins and my father, and since my father had died, I half-owned Prince. Hopkins didn't like this idea, but had to agree that I had rights for Prince. Things developed really fast, but at a certain moment, the investigation reached a deadlock. I almost lost hope to see Prince again when I remembered that I had Prince's braid, which allowed to conduct a biological expertise that confirmed that Nasik was Prince and that it belonged to us. Steve was arrested and Prince was brought to us. I can't describe how happy I was to meet my Prince again. Despite the fact he was an animal, he did feel how much I missed him, and I was sure he missed me. He was a smart horse with a big soul. According to our agreement with Hopkins, I became Prince's rider, and Bill was his horsekeeper and instructor. Of course, Prince soon became the champion of our state, and in a couple of years, a 2-time national and Olympic champion. He cost a few $1,000,000, but I didn't agree to sell him, because he was my friend, and selling a friend, even for millions, was a wrong thing to do. Hopkins was angry with me for that and cursed the gentleman's agreement with my father. Well, this is the story of my friend Prince and me. Have you ever had a chance to create a world champion? Click the like button, leave your comments, and subscribe to our channel. And don't betray your friends.
My name is Sansa. All my friends have boyfriends, and each time we girls gather together, they talk about their boyfriends and discuss them. I'm the only one who has nothing to share, because my relationships always fail. I'm an ordinary girl. All that differentiates me from others is my name and the fact that I can drink liters of soda without gaining any weight. Ha ha ha. But my relationships fail due to another reason. It's because I hate all kinds of animals, insects, and other living creatures. I even hate cats, which look cute of course, but when I think about how much hair they have and how they can spit up, I want to stay as much away from them as possible. And boys like animals and insects, especially exotic ones, like frogs, spiders, etc. As for me, even hamsters make me feel nauseous. When I think that these guys approach at least 1 meter to any such thing, I want to throw up. However, spiders do like me, while I do hate them. It may sound weird, but spiders seem to surround me everywhere. They can crawl into my purse, land on my arm from the ceiling during a lesson, and make everyone laugh at my reaction. I even had an idea to buy a beekeeper suit because it seems like I will feel more or less secure in it. My friends make jokes about that all the time. Someone even said that I had all chances to become a spider woman. However, such attention doesn't flatter me. All I want is to feel safe. Once a new guy came to our class. His name was Steven, and he was from a wealthy family. At least he said so. All girls had a crush on him. He was very popular. The thing that I liked about him most was that he didn't have any pets. In addition, he was very handsome and cool, and soon I was head over heels in love with him. He made me feel so excited and nervous that I was shaking and speechless every time I was close to him. One day I was brave enough to come up and talk to him. Not talk, actually, mumble, articulate something indistinctly. He looked at me and asked if I needed help, and if he had to call an ambulance. I turned around and ran away from him. I stayed at home for the whole week, and when I finally went to school again and saw Steven, all I could do was to leave as soon as practicable. I tried to avoid him, but that wasn't really necessary as he didn't notice me at all, and even forgot that I ever existed. Once when I was carrying a few very heavy books, I saw Steven. Of course, I lowered my head down and started moving faster to avoid meeting him. At this moment, he ran toward me without seeing me and bumped into me. One of those heavy books slipped from the pile and fell right on his foot. One of his toes was crashed. I felt awful. Steven was hospitalized. I decided I had to do something to help him and make up for what I had done. So I started visiting him at the hospital, bringing him fresh tea and delicious cookies. This helped to get closer to him. We talked a lot, discussed family trips to other countries, variety of cuisines, etc. When Steven got discharged from the hospital, he threw a party for his friends and invited me. The most privileged and popular kids from the school gathered at his place, and I didn't feel comfortable in such a company. Steven wanted to surprise his friends and offered them to drink coffee, the most expensive coffee in the world, as he explained. We all started talking about it, making assumptions why it was so expensive. Steven kept giggling and refused to say anything until we tasted it. I felt something was wrong and made an attempt to refuse politely, but he was persistent and promised I would like it. Finally, I gave up and made a sip. The coffee had a tart, slightly bitter, and unusual taste, but on the whole, it was okay. When we finished, Steven explained that the coffee was named Kopi Luwak and that its production was rather unconventional. Animals eat coffee plant fruit, but their stomachs cannot digest the seeds, which then leave the animals' bodies with feces. These seeds are then collected, packed, and sold. When I imagined the entire process, I realized what I had drunk. I felt nauseous. I rushed to the toilet, but failed to reach it in time. I threw up in the middle of the corridor. The idea of such a shame forced me to leave the house immediately. Since then, I have been staying at home. I can hardly look into Steven's eyes or appear at school without being mocked. I think I will transfer to another school. Steven knew how squeamish I was and still insisted on trying that coffee. It was mean. I don't know how to live with that. Have you ever had such situations? Please leave your comments.